What are vengeful spirits in Jujutsu Kaisen? And specifically, who are Japan's big three? Let's talk about it. Alright, so to start, let's lay some really quick groundwork here. In JJK, there are things called cursed spirits. These are like the majority of the enemies in JJK. Cursed spirits are beings born of cursed energy, which is born of negative emotions. So when people have these negative emotions, these fears, they can ultimately coalesce into beings like Jogo here, who is the disaster curse representative of humanity's fear of the earth, of volcanoes, of fire, etc., right? Now, I say he's a disaster curse, so he's one of the big examples, right? But even smaller fears could manifest into less powerful cursed spirits. But at the end of the day, cursed spirits aren't created by like one singular individual. They are representative of a collective of fears that has manifested into a being. Now, vengeful cursed spirits, on the other hand, are completely different because they are born of a singular individual. The way someone like Rika is made is when someone passes away and they are cursed, they will become a vengeful cursed spirit. But what exactly does that mean? So curses are obviously a huge theme in JJK, and I don't just mean like entities, but like actual cursing of someone. Now, we aren't ever told explicitly like the mechanics of how that works, and I think that's intentional. It's supposed to be vague. But obviously last words have a huge impact on people, and in the case of Rika and Akotsu unknowingly cursed Rika when they were both children and she passed away because he loved her and he didn't want her to go away, right? And as we know, Akotsu has a massive, massive pool of cursed energy. So his words combined with her death and his massive pool of cursed energy coalesced to create this vengeful cursed spirit Rika. However, this isn't the only way to create a vengeful cursed spirit. We know that when sorcerers or cursed users die, they themselves can become a vengeful cursed spirit if they aren't killed with cursed energy. So, for example, if you were to kill a normal sorcerer with, say, a gun, then you run the risk of them becoming a vengeful cursed spirit because their own cursed energy could leak upon their death and transform them into a vengeful cursed spirit. Now, not all vengeful cursed spirits are created equal. There's a lot of variables at play, right? How much cursed energy was involved? What was the strength of the curse placed upon the person at their death? In any case, vengeful cursed spirits are nothing to mess with, but at the top of the scale, we're told that it's nearly impossible to exercise a curse as strong as Rika. They are no joke, and that brings us to the big three. So the big three vengeful spirits mentioned in this panel are actually based on real-life historical figures from Japan. Gege often draws inspiration from real-life history and mythology, and this is no exception. Those three are Sugawara no Michizane, Taira no Masakado, and Emperor Sutoku, and please forgive any mispronunciations there. Now, I'm not well-versed in Japanese history or mythology, so if you'd like to know more about their real-life historical context here, I recommend looking into it, especially if you're a history buff. It is really interesting. I just don't think I could do it justice here. But the main thing you need to know is that these are three real-life people who were big figures in Japan at the time that they were around. And interestingly, this was all during the Heian era. Now, basically why they're considered vengeful cursed spirits is after their deaths, they basically resulted in plagues, disasters, and disturbances nationwide. Okay, so now that we know all of that, what's the context within JJK? Well, one, it could just be a cool historical Easter egg from Gege, right? The way vengeful spirits work in his world could explain these real-life myths we have about these three figures, right? But it could go deeper than that. However, there's only been one explicit mention of these three in the entire story so far, and it happened in Jujutsu Kaisen 0. And it was this mention of Sugawara from Gojo here. He mentions it because he says that he and Akotsu are both related to Sugawara, so they are, distant relatives. Now, what's interesting that we can take from this is that perhaps Sugawara was the founder of the Gojo clan. And even more interesting, he might have been a limitless six-eyes user, which could, in terms of real life history, explain why he was such a prominent and powerful figure, right? He might have even been the first limitless six-eyes user. Now, that's all pure conjecture, right? Because again, this is literally the only mention in the story we're going off of, but it is interesting to think about. So if you'll humor me and we follow along the thread of that assumption for a minute, that Sugawara no Michizane was the founder of the Gojo clan, then perhaps the other two vengeful spirits are responsible for the prominence of the other two major clans in Jujutsu society, the Kamo clan and the Zenin clan. So if that is the case, then perhaps Taira no Masakado could be connected to the Zenin clan, because famously his daughter, after his death, was labeled as a witch because she used frogs and skeletons to do her bidding, which sounds a little bit like the Ten Shadows. And specifically, this huge skeleton is reminiscent of the enormous spine we see in Megami's domain expansion, and then obviously frogs are one of the Ten Shadows. And that would leave Emperor Sutoku to be connected to the Kamo clan, whose hereditary technique is blood manipulation. And as legend would have it, at the end of his life, Emperor Sutoku would take to writing down Buddha's sutras in his own blood. So, y'all take all that with a grain of salt. It's pretty flimsy evidence at best, but it is certainly interesting, right? And massive shout out to Kaun for this generous donation asking me to talk about this. Thank you so much for the support, man. And finally, while we're on the subject, I had this question from Sleepy on if Yuta could curse another person upon their death, essentially making another cursed spirit like Rika. So, yes and no. I mean, the answer is no, but here's why I say yes and no. Because technically, all of the mechanics at play that created Rika are still true in the universe, right? Vengeful Cursed Spirits can be created by the ways I talked about earlier in this video. And Akotsu is a very powerful sorcerer, right? So technically, could he curse somebody else? Yes, but I don't think that will ever happen because there were too many unique circumstances that came together for that moment. One is that he had a childhood best friend die in front of him and that he inadvertently cursed her, and due to his massive amount of cursed energy, it became Rika. But Rika also loved Okotsu, right? So that's the only reason she listened to him and he had some level of control over her. In most cases, vengeful cursed spirits like that would hunt down the person that created them, right? So Okotsu, being more mature, being in more control of his power, wouldn't ever curse somebody like that again, nor does he have a relationship with anyone akin to that with Rika when they were so young, right? So again, is it theoretically possible? Yes, because vengeful cursed spirits can be created. But would Akotsu ever do that? Nor could he even attempt to make something as powerful as Rika, even if he tried to? I highly, highly doubt it. Alrighty, y'all. I was going to end the video there, but I just couldn't help myself because there is one more thing to talk about to make this subject truly complete, but it is manga spoilers. So for my anime onlys, we'll see you in the next one. All right, the other thing I wanted to talk about was Naoya zenin, right? We already went over an example of how a vengeful cursed spirit like Rika was created with somebody cursing somebody when they died. But let's talk about the other kind, where a sorcerer is killed without cursed energy. This is exactly what happened to Naoya. Now, he had his battle with Maki and he was pretty messed up, but he wasn't actually dead. So it's not until he crawls on over to where Maki's mom is that she kills him with just a regular knife, right? So that leads to Naoya becoming a vengeful cursed spirit. And to cite back to our earlier talk on how strong vengeful cursed spirits were, Cursed Naoya was a problem. I think it's fair to say he was in the same echelon as Rika, probably not as strong as Rika, given her unique power set and abilities, but it was no slouch. One of the strongest cursed spirits we've seen in the entire story. It took an awakened Maki to take this guy down. And she even had help, right? Now, not that she needed it once she became fully awakened, but fact remains that this was a 4v1. So, yeah, vengeful cursed spirits, no joke. And yeah, I just wanted to mention Naoya in this video. So that's going to do it for this one, y'all, and I will see you in the next one.